Good morning, thank you guys for being here. My name is Karla Lemus, and Karla Lemus Gordy. I have two last names, so sometimes it gets a little complicated. But this summer, I worked in the Brown lab looking at urea and how it could be an unrecognized component of reactive nitrogen. I would just like to start off by thanking the US Department of Energy for their research grant, the National Science Foundation for their research grant, Series and Rex, and then I would like to acknowledge Alicia, Dana, who clarified that I'm her favorite Gemini sun, and Bree, Allie, the rest of the Brown Lab, especially Hanale, Zach for scintillation vials and lids and information about ground carbon, and the Rex cohort, you guys are amazing, and then my family as well. So I want to start off with this picture. I really want you guys to tap into what emotions you feel after looking at this absolutely wonderful picture. And then I will lead in with this quote that was said by C.C. Dulwich. Of all man's recent interventions in the cycles of nature, the industrial fixation of nitrogen far exceeds all the others in magnitude. And this was in 1970, so it's still true to this day. Nitrogen fixation is the process of taking all of this N2 in the atmosphere, which is about 78%, and taking it and making it into bio-friendly versions of it so that everybody can use it, because we all need nitrogen, plants need it, animals need it, it's essential, but it is inert and it's a triple bond, so it's really hard to break that down. So it goes into the nitrogen cycle where it then comes out with forms of reactive nitrogen. Some of these forms of reactive nitrogen are NO, NO2, NH3. NO and NO2 in the 1960s and in the 1970s was creating a lot of pollution and adverse health effects. So there was the Clean Air Act that was passed that really regulated all of these emissions and made NOx less relevant. Thus, other forms of reactive nitrogen were more prevalent, and we did not know a lot about them because we did focus a lot on the NOx. Another form of reactive nitrogen that we don't know a lot about is urea. Urea, we know, exists in cloud droplets and in aerosols, and most recently we have learned that it is in the gas phase as well. All of us here in this room sweat and we all have excrements, so we all have contributed to some sort of urea in the atmosphere, as well as this beautiful drawing of this cow and its excrements and the rest of that. So this leads me to my first question, which is how much gas phase urea is in the atmosphere? So I was tasked with creating a urea calibration apparatus, which I successfully did. I was able to take aqueous urea and apply heat to it and turn it into a gas, which was great. I was going to run it through the calibration system to further dilute this gas, but unfortunately this very expensive instrument that I spent a lot of time working on did not work in time for me to actually calibrate this. So that would be in future work. This is an example of the graph that I was going to try to analyze with this urea calibration, and it is super duper complicated. I know there's a lot of information on there, and unless you guys have about 2 months of your time to devote to this, then I will just skip past it. You guys can email me later. My second question is, how does urea behave in the atmosphere? So we know that urea exists in cloud droplets and in aerosols, but what is it doing up there? So here we have two different scenarios. On the left, we can see that there is an aerosol where urea and glyoxal, which is another common aerosol, is they're mixing together. There's water that is added, and they create this cloud droplet. Then through the process of evaporation, all of these components evaporate and it goes back to being a small cloud droplet that requires a lot of water saturation to become a cloud. On the right-hand side, we have the same situation happening. Water evaporates because it's always going to evaporate. However, urea and glyoxal, the product that they make, does not evaporate and instead creates a bigger aerosol, a bigger cloud droplet that requires less water saturation. So which one of these scenarios is happening? We know that industrially, urea and glyoxal react together to make something. However, this is done under high heat and in an aqueous solution to produce urea glyoxal resin that is then used for bonded plywood. So we know that these react industrially, and we know that urea and glyoxal are commonly found in aerosols, but do they react in the atmosphere? Obviously, the atmosphere does not have high heat, nor does it have an aqueous solution, so we did have to tweak those conditions a little bit. So I took urea, glyoxal, and acetone, another organic compound that is found in aerosols, and I mixed them in 3 different ratios. I did all of these reactions in both parafilm and lid, and lidded vials, just because I couldn't find lids that would fit my first set of reactions, you know, science stuff. And we will be focusing on this 1:1 and 1:2 ratio, because these are the ones that gave the most results. Here is a picture of all the yellow gooey solid that was formed through the process of my reactions. And I took all of this, I took the solid and I dissolved it in water, and then I also took the solution that this was in, and I ran all of them through the UV vis. So the UV vis, what it does is it takes light, it runs it through this, it runs it through the sample in this machine, in this instrument. I use the Carry 500 UV vis, and then it gave me a bunch of different graphs, so where it showed me the absorbance at different wavelengths. And this is me pointing to it. So for my first graph, we will focus on the urea and glyoxal control throughout the range of the 350 through 405, just so you guys can see that it's not absorbing at all. And then we will add in the different ratios that I have on there. For the first one, you can see that this 1:2 parafilm solid that was dissolved in water peaked, it absorbed here at the 350 to 405 range. We can see that the solid 1:1 lid ratio also absorbed here, and then the highest peak absorbance was the solid 1:1 parafilm ratio. And obviously we know that this isn't urea or glyoxal absorbing because they're right there and they did not absorb. My second graph is for the solutions, and again we will focus on 360 to 394, and we can see no absorbance for the urea and glyoxal control. So here are some peaks, so we will be focusing on this solution 1:2 parafilm ratio that did absorb, and this solution 1:1 parafilm ratio that also absorbed. In both of these wavelength ranges, we have a purple, indigo / like blue color. And in that ratio, usually organic aerosols that is where they will show up that they are absorbing, because to us, they come out as like a clear brown, yellow color, which was obvious in those pictures that I showed you guys. And so basically I created brown carbon. It wasn't completely brown and it wasn't super duper dark, but I did create brown carbon. So what this means is that it could have atmospheric implications. We know that brown carbon, it absorbs light and then it radiates the atmosphere, and obviously we don't want anything else heating up the atmosphere. We have enough. It gives us an idea of what like urea and glyoxal are doing up in the atmosphere when they are reacting, when they produce a product. So if we go back to this diagram that I showed you guys at first, with what I saw with my experiment, the product that urea and glyoxal create, it really follows this right-hand side. And I don't know about you guys, but I definitely don't want clouds that need less water saturation, but have a urea and glyoxal product forming up in the atmosphere. That does not sound pleasant. So what now? I would like to do detailed urea and glyoxal reactions because obviously there's a product forming there, and I would really like to fine tune all of my conditions in order to better fit the atmosphere and better know what conclusions I can draw about the radiative forcing that this could be causing. I would also like to take the apparatus that I made and use it in the top sims so that I can see the concentration of the of urea in the gas phase and how this really plays a role in the nitrogen cycle, because some of the signal is really high, and if there is a lot of urea in the gas phase up there, it could be very, very important to the nitrogen cycle. So a summary of the findings, you guys can see the two questions that I posed throughout my slideshow. The first one was how much gas phase urea is in the atmosphere, and I told you guys that I created an apparatus, but unfortunately wasn't able to use it. My second question, how does urea behave in the atmosphere? We saw that urea and glyoxal create a product that could have ground carbon implications. And now we will return to this lovely picture and the quote. All of these anthropogenic things that are happening that we are creating could be affecting the amount of reactive nitrogen that is being created through nitrogen fixation, thus also implicating different consequences to the world, such as the possible ground carbon implication of urea and glyoxal. So, what do we want to do with that? Obviously more funding, please.